So again, welcome to our USF Transgender Spectrum Initiative, our second event of the speaker series. So it's Discerning Authenticity, Navigating Trans Identity and Spirituality. So welcome, and the next slide, please. So first, we want to introduce our teams here who have worked on this project. I will start. My name is C.Y. Kao. I use he, him pronouns. I am a program manager here at the Cultural Centers, USF. And I'm also a member of the Jesuit community at USF. Next, pass on to Juno.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Juno Chambers. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I'm the graduate coordinator for the Gender and Sexuality Center within the Cultural Centers at USF.
And hello, everyone. My name is Lionel Daggs III. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm one of the assistant directors of the Cultural Center.
Mm-hmm. And I want to mention that this project is funded by the generous grant offered by our Jesuit Foundation at USF. So made possible by this funding, and also is organized and coordinated by USF's Gender and Sexuality Center. And this particular event, we're doing it in partnership of with our university ministry. Next slide, please. Great. So giving you an overview today's program. So after this slide, we'll do a land acknowledgement, just recognizing the land we occupied at USF. And then we have an opening prayer. And after that, we'll do a community agreements, just like to set the tone for this space, for the sharing and listening. And then we enter into a panel discussion, and very excited about this very wonderful panelists we have been able to invite. And we have about an hour to listen to the dialogue, the conversation, the sharing of our panelists. And then after that, we have a small group discussion. We'll put folks who participate here into small groups and to kind of like share out what you have heard. It's very short, 5 minutes. And then we'll bring people back to the big space, and then we have a Q&A session. That's kind of the program today. Next slide, please. So here, just want to acknowledge that USF's campus is sitting on a lonely land. And I will read the text. Today, we cannot deny the story of this land and its truth that is too often untold. Today, we gather on unceded, stolen, unknowing territory. So recognizing that today, the audience from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, we have several folks who are not in the US. So I'll encourage you all to spend time to kind of learn about the land that you occupy and also the history. So next slide, please. Next, we're gonna center ourselves in this discussion using this prayer, and I will invite my colleague, Juno, to read a prayer for us.
Thank you, CY. So just inviting folks to enter into a reflective and space as we start this prayer. We rise each day into a world that fits our natures, our understandings, our assumptions. The clay of our bodies and faces conform to our spirits, male, female. We are learning it is not so for all of us. Some of us are born of a wilder imagination. We are learning new language and new images for those spirit is coloring outside our lives. Transgender, intersex, gender variant. We confess that we have slumbered while members of our family are slaughtered. The headwind of hatred batters bodies and minds and spirits, the diverse beauties that continue to arise. We commit to standing against this headwind of hate, a bulwark to end this battering. We commit to seeing the diverse beauty all around us, every gendered and gender-free expression, every form of love. We commit to loving difference and becoming. We commit to learning the new languages that enable our beloveds to exist and thrive. Love, Make us bold to live our own lives fully and abundantly. Love, give us passion to work for everyone's full abundance. Love, gather us together, that no one you have created is not seen, is not allowed to live, is ever lost to the hurricane of hate and
Yes, I recognize the prayer really bring up a lot of experiences and memories of what we have. Some of us have experienced and also have shared, here, listened to the stories from. So I want to give people that space to, before we start the conversation and the dialogue, I want to recognize that. Today, in our event, we want to set the tone for this conversation, this discussion. So we have a few community agreements I want to suggest and recommend for us to follow. So the first one on the slide is the share square. So it means that take space and make space. So here that we encourage you all to actively participate in listening and sharing, but I want us to be mindful of several members in this group that we have trans identifying people and we have students as well. So recognizing that we want to uplift these voices in particular. So be mindful of the identity that you hold, the role that you hold, and also so that we can make sure we uplift these voices in the space. And the second on the list is brave space. So this is a space that we invite people to share on challenging topics. So we want people to be a little bolder and to be able to challenge yourself and challenge each other a little bit. And the next is intent versus impact. So in this space, we ask you all who speak to own not only the intent of what you say, but also the impact of it. So we encourage you all to think about these things when you are offering your sharing. And the next is listen to understand. So here we ask us all to practice active listening in our conversations. And also I will here advocate the Ignatian Plus. So that's assuming the best intention of people. So either in the chats or when you hear something, always assume that best intention. And the next is planting the seed. So today is we want to offer that this space is a growth space. What you hear and say today would plant a seed for to continue this dialogue and conversation. So this might be a start for some of us in the space, but I want to make sure that this is not, the conversation will not end here, will continue. And the last one is the confidentiality, is what is said here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. So I will encourage you all to take the lessons you learn with you, but leave the personal stories in the space. So honor those people who share the stories. And it's those personal stories that we need to really respect and honor in this space. So next, we will, let's see. So I want to welcome today our moderator, Father Donald Gaffrey, and he is one of my fellow Jesuits here at USF. And also he was recently named the University Chaplain of the University of San Francisco. And he has been an activist for LGBT people in the Bay Area for over 30 years and is a beloved member of our USF community. And he is also author of the book, Gays and Grays, the story of the gay community at Most Holy Redeemer Catholic Church. So please join me in welcoming Father Donald Gaffrey.
Thank you so much, CY. Can everybody hear me? Are you hearing me, CY?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. I also want to thank everybody at the Gender and Sexuality Center, especially Lionel and Juno. And also, I have to give a shout out for my namesake, Father Godfrey, and the Jesuit Foundation for your support for this event and the entire series. I think this series is at the heart of our Jesuit mission here at the University of San Francisco. So I'm delighted that you were able to support us. I also want to thank everybody who's come here today, even some from Colombia, from different countries across different continents. As CY said, this series is primarily intended, and I know we all respect this, as one way of supporting our trans-identified students. It's rather than as an academic exercise. But that said, everybody is welcome. As CY mentioned, my name is Donal and my pronouns he, him, his. And as a Jesuit priest and a cisgender gay identified man, it's a special honor and privilege for me to moderate today's conversation, Discerning Authenticity, Navigating Trans Identity and Spirituality. There's an article in a Catholic magazine this month about this very topic. The magazine is Commonweal, and the article by Daniel Walden expresses my hopes for the conversation this evening. And I'm going to quote just a few lines from that article, which is worth reading. He quotes, he says, the Dominican priest Herbert McCabe said, "To give love is to give the precious gift of nothing, space. To give love is to let be. Creation is simply and solely letting things be. And our love is a faint image of that. When we take the time to let a person be who they are and tell the story of their being, we are also participating, however faintly, in the act of creation. And in doing so, we become more fully the human beings we were created to be." I also add, knowing that the speakers are well able to disagree with me if they wish, that I'm aware that those identified as trans are themselves very diverse in every way. And when I invited this panel, I didn't expect them to speak on behalf of the entire transgender spectrum community. As you put in the box also so well, Lev, and I love this, you dedicated this, and I join you in this dedication. You dedicated this time to all transgender and gender expansive people in our world who are alone, who feel alone, and who are isolated from community. May they receive ways of love and compassion from our experience. And that says in another way what that quote also says. We published the speakers' short bios online, where you probably already read them. I'm expecting a rich conversation from our panel who come from different perspectives. But we had a meeting earlier in the week and we discussed this, and at least one of them said to me, please let us introduce ourselves. So I am not going to do that formal introduction. You can read it online and they're going to get a chance now to share their own introduction. And we're going to go alphabetically. The speakers are Hilary Howes, Jhos Singer, and Fresh Lev White. And after they speak, I'll have some questions and conversation, and you then will have a chance to prepare questions and conversation that we will continue. So I'm going to go, if it's okay, Hilary, I'm going to go in alphabetical order and invite you to, if you're ready, to share.
Oh no, I'm not ready. No, I'll be happy to share.
Thank you.
And somebody has to go first, right? So I'm really happy to be here, seeing you all. It's a thrill for me to have a Catholic school having me speak. I started speaking back in the 90s, and at the time we knew that we needed to be speaking with elementary schools and high schools, and we knew that just wasn't possible. But we were talking to therapists, and we were talking to college classes, and I'm seeing some nodding there from Jhos. He was talking back then too. So in some ways, I'm a terrible speaker for today, because this is about college students, and it's been a long time since I was a college student. But our journeys are not necessarily so different. I'll tell you that for me, I was born in California. I was raised in San Jose, went to college in San Francisco, raised my family up in Marin County. Didn't move to Maryland, where I am now, until 2000. So it's been 20 years here. People are starting to think maybe I'm a Marylander. I'm still not sure. Certainly my California accent comes through. But for me, my spiritual journey has been different from a lot of Catholics, and it allows me to do the kind of work I do within the Catholic Church because I was raised as an atheist. I did not have the kind of problems with the church that come from transitioning in the church. So for me, I didn't have religion, didn't understand it. I really honestly thought it would make any difference to me. I did marry a Catholic, and she was raised by a former Jesuit, almost a priest. I guess he spent 10 years in the seminary. And so her Catholicism was very thoughtful, and I was exposed to it a lot. And ultimately, that helped call me to Catholicism. So I transitioned back in the 90s, and that was through really a psychological study and group therapy and working with support groups, and before the internet. And so it was because I needed to. My life had become completely unmanageable. And I had to admit who I was. So 5 years later, I moved to the East Coast here, into a little community called Greenbelt. And in that community, it's a very, let's see, bohemian, shall we say. I think it's older than hippie. And I think that what had happened in their parish was somebody reactionary had come in, and they reacted to it with just about everybody in the parish council leaving and starting an intentional Eucharistic community. That was years before I got to Greenbelt, and but I discovered it when I got here, and after 3 years attending that, where there's shared homily. So people are free to disagree with the priest. The priest is free to say what they want because there's no hierarchy. And it's a very free-flowing, kind of Al-Anon meeting sort of feeling to it. So it gave me a chance to explore Catholicism without a lot of the dogma and issues that come up within the church. So that was that. In 3 years, I got baptized, and that was really just the beginning of my journey. I continued on to do service and work with New Age Ministry and Dignity International. And really help create a place for transgender people within the Catholic Church. And so that has been my mission. I've created a website that allows people to visit and get the positive spin on what Catholicism has to say about transgender people. But it's we don't print anything that's questionable, I would say. It's all well supported, and it's approved by a priest who I work with, and so it not so much for transgender people themselves, but very often family members come to it, and when they're wondering how to go about it. And so that kind of gets us up to date where we are. I think that's probably used up more than my time.
Thank you so much, Hilary. That's great. Yeah, by the way, we still claim you for California. And you're free to disagree with this priest too. I think it's your turn. Yeah. Okay.
There we go. Sorry, the
No problem.
clicker was way over in the corner. My clumsy old hands were not quite getting it. Hi, y'all. My name is Jhos. I'm, wow, where do I even start on this crazy journey? I'm one of those people, so I'm 62, and I have certainly known that I had a broader soul than they would have led me to believe as a child. Which is to say that from an early age, my femaleness was completely aware of a maleness that wasn't being seen, that wasn't being given space, that was tamped down and hidden deep inside me, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with that. That said, if you do the math, you'll see that I was born in 1959. So that was the year that Christine Jorgensen transitioned. It was 10 years before Stonewall. And those two things, the wave that Christine Jorgensen, with her very public, very, not the first by any means, but probably the first very public transition. When you drop a rock in the water, ripples happen, waves happen. And I got to catch that first wave. And I'm so grateful to all of my trans and queer forebears for having dropped those multiple stones in that pond. So I was very lucky that as a kid I got away with being a tomboy, and that was fine, pretty much. I mean, wasn't 100% fine, but overall it was good enough, right? Like, I got to wear the clothes I wanted to wear after school. During school I had to wear the dresses and all of that, which was awful, but after school I could run home, change into my dungarees and t-shirt, and I, had a life as a tomboy. And that worked out pretty well. In adolescence, there was feminism that was happening. So there was a little bit more room for me to express myself. Like, I took woodshop. And so did Shannon Irvin. And Shannon Irvin was very femme. And, we were like feminists, and we got to go to woodshop. So, like that. So I was like, I feel like the pioneers who were ahead of me, I caught the best part of the wave, I have to say. Like, I got a really, relatively speaking, smooth ride. Just bumpy enough to make me appreciate what was changing in our society. Just bumpy enough, just dangerous enough to feel like this is important. It's important to be who you are. And so step by step, I got to unfold to those parts of myself, the tomboy, the feminist, the lesbian, and eventually the man who had been waiting in line for a long time to get out. And, enough had changed that I was really like, but I don't know if I really have to do this physically. And I had an amazing therapist that I was working with, actually psychiatrist at Kaiser, the amazing Dr. Robin D., who said, little name dropping there, who said, when I first walked in, completely, my former self, and she immediately called me Mr., and she immediately diagnosed me as a tweener, and said, you can do what you need to do here. You don't have to conform to the Benjamin standards, which were the standards in place for previous generations that said you had to live as your preferred gender for a year before they would give you any help, which is like, that's like jeepers. Do you hand out bullseyes with that? Because I could just put one on my back, It's a horrible thing to ask people to do. And we talked and talked, and you know, it was before they them was even a possibility, and non-binary was not a word that was being bandied about, and gender fluid was not, it's like maybe a little driblet of gender fluid. And then one day she said, you know, Jhos, you can do whatever you want, and I'm not pushing anything, but I just want to suggest something because I don't feel like we're getting you any happier, because I was miserable. And she said we could do a trial of testosterone for spiritual reasons. And I was like, damn, you got me on that one. Like, you know, now you're talking my language. What are you talking about? And what'll happen and whatever. And I decided, yeah, that's right. That's the right thing to do. And I did. I got my first injection of testosterone, and I literally within 24 hours, I felt my brain open up in ways that it had never done before. Like, you know those little orange sponges you get at Trader Joe's, and you put water on them and they go, that was like my brain. And at that point, I was like, you know what? If I can feel like this, I don't care what it does to me. I don't care. I just want to be able to have a mind, body, psyche alignment. And with no physical changes, I was feeling that. And then, of course, physical changes came, and I lost all my hair, and now I am really into DE wet shaving for anybody out there who's like a fan. So whatever. There's that. That's the gender trajectory. And the religious trajectory is kind of similar. I was not born Jewish, and I was drawn to Judaism as a small kid. I could not tell you exactly why. All I know is the little bit that it crossed my path, I was like, I need to go there. I need to find out more about that. And I had a teacher in 5th grade who was Jewish, and she was talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the big Jewish high holidays. And when she was describing what it was, she was explaining to us she wasn't going to be in class, but we didn't have to bring her an apple. She wasn't sick, you know, or anything. We didn't have to bring her like any get well cards or anything. I remember her talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and you know the phrase "prick up your ears." That's what happened. Like, I physically can still remember the feeling of like my ears like standing up. And I came home and I asked my mom, "Mom, what's a Jew?" And my mom said, "Well, according to Ben Gurion, a Jew is anyone who calls himself a Jew." And I said, "Great, then I'm a Jew." And she had eyebrows like twice as thick as mine, and one went like shooting up into her hairline, and she said, "Well, more power to you, kid." And in the same way that I was blessed to have her as someone who allowed me to wear those dungarees and those t-shirts, she also allowed me to explore my Jewishness and didn't get in my way. And it was a long, long journey. And in my 30s, I finally converted officially. And now I'm a professional Jew. So I work as a Magid, which probably few of you have heard of. It's basically a rabbi without a badge. So I don't make laws and I don't enforce laws, but I do everything else that a rabbi does. I preach and I counsel and I bury and I welcome, and I've been blessed to find queer Jewish community that has also evolved with me on that wave. So that's a lot. I'm going to hand it off to Lev.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Jhos.
Jhos.
All right, it'll take me a minute. Rhymes are close, right? Hilary, thank you for your share and your website and the ways that it provides support, you know, particularly for families as they transition with their loved ones, right? So important. And Jhos, I had to write it down because you said dungarees, and like I just almost started cracking up. I was like, just because, right? So does everybody know what dungarees are? Anyway, it just made me laugh, my younger self. So my name is Lev, and I also go by Fresh. People know me in both capacities. I was born in New York and grew up there. I was actually orphaned as a child, and at this later end of my life, I recently just received my birth certificate for the first time in January, literally a day or two before my 58th birthday. So that's something that I'm holding and sitting with, as you can imagine, has its own joy and trauma in that experience. I remember when I was very young, there was also another sibling, a sister of mine, who we played together, and I remember, the game that I liked the most was like brother sister, where I was always the brother. Being labeled female at birth, I also had the experience of wearing dresses, very particular dresses, and Sunday school with the patent leather, and if they were lucky, I'd get home and change before hitting the backyard and muddying everything up playing football. And then like when I came out at around 15 or so, and it was around the same time we had moved from a private home into this area of the Northeast Bronx. It's sort of was kind of its own kind of Oz place, but it was apartments, and the community was mostly Jewish. And so it was like Jewish, Black, and then Latin was sort of, and then Italians and everybody. It was very mixed. I had a very colorful youth. I was very fortunate to have lots of different ethnicities in my experience. But that was my first introduction, or maybe even had an earlier introduction to we'll say Jews through family health care doctors. But it wasn't until I was about maybe even I would say 11, 12, I started playing with people, young people. My friends were Jewish, and I also had a draw. And then I came out at 15 as queer. And I was just telling someone the other day, or I was having this conversation with someone about how, like, when I came out, like I told everybody, I'm like, I'm gay, I'm gay, I'm gay. And, as Jhos was saying, blessings to the ancestors that made it safe for me to be able to do that. And then, of course, I was sort of a rambunctious, naive kid as well, which is fine. And I don't say it with judgment because it actually allowed me to be more of myself. And then spiritually, I felt for a very long time that I was a woman who had a masculine spirit. And I found lots of comfort in that. I identified as a baby butch. It's a treasured identity. If you get the opportunity to do that in your next lifetime, go for it. I really loved being like this baby butch, baby dyke person. And going in, I was still just different things happening in my family has meant that I was actually out of the house at 16. So I made it into the village during a time when Sylvester was still like the disco queen, and Sylvester was this musical icon from San Francisco who was cross-dressing and well known across the world as this performer. And so it's very interesting to look at how we have the mainstream world and we have this gay world where electricity is happening. Not everybody's paying attention, but enough people were to make this person an icon. And then getting to college, so I went to University of New York, SUNY Purchase. It was a art school, even though I was in the liberal arts program. And I got yanked into the LGB community because that's what we had. So that was around 1983, 84. LGB community, and I was president within months because of the personality that I had. And it was also during that time that I learned that people were coming in from the city up to Westchester County and telling us about a disease that was killing gay men in the village. So this was the time when people started talking about AIDS. And let me see what else I want to say. There was something I was going to say about college as well, but yeah, so that was sort of my college experience. And then move forward a couple more years, and I'm in San Francisco. And I remember having this experience of, I'm about 32. I made it through the late 70s and the 80s, which was extremely challenging for fashion, and someone who was sort of like trying to make it work, and not always finding the right, couldn't necessarily even walk into a men's store alone and trying to figure it out. I was so glad to get to 80s San Francisco. All that was required was a black t-shirt, black pair of silver tab Levi's, and then I was insubordinate, so I had to wear my brown leather boots over my black leather boots. And I remember looking in the mirror, and I was like, like 140 something pounds, and kind of buff. And I remember looking in the mirror and going, yes, I have arrived. And a voice in my head says, yeah, but you're not a man. And I'm like, who is that, right? And I just went further into my feminism. And I'll back up and say I started doing drag actually in Washington, D.C. So I went from New York to D.C., started doing drag, and I was raising money to support the National Organization for AIDS. I can't remember the name of it at this time. So then I continue, I become a drag king in San Francisco. 1999, I'm a drag king. And speaking of working with youth, so sounds like Hilary and Jhos had an experience of working with older people. I was able to step in by 2002. They were allowing LGBTQ trainings in San Francisco. So I was in there with the fifth graders getting my training. Getting my training on how to work with people, the absolutely fabulous. So that's where I started doing trans and LGBT diversity trainings, or trans and LGBTQ diversity trainings, though it was still LGB at the time. During those early years, we began to expand later. At about 38, the straight woman who I had made out with the night before sat with me at a bar, and we talked about whatever we were talking about. She asked me if I was trans, and I got a little upset because my experience with trans, and was that I met trans women when I was 16, 17, 18, younger, and my experience was that to be trans, it was work. You don't just wake up one day and you're trans. These people are, excuse my language, but those women that I knew, and I didn't know any men, were working hard if they could find work. They were surviving. And I just felt like it's a privilege to call yourself trans. You don't just do that. And that's because I was in some locked in marriage and I just missed the whole scene. So I educated myself, and I found out that not only were trans people thriving and were there trans masculine people, and that there were trans women who were actually in higher positions and in different places that I couldn't see from my perspective. I found myself trans, and really digging that identity. Previously in DC, in the Black and Native communities there, I identified as two-spirit, but that was different than transgender for me at the time. So at 38, she asked me if I was trans. I said, I don't know. I said no, and then I said, I don't know. So then I spent like every day for 10 years thinking about it. I asked myself, or one day I said to my then wife, if I want to grow up and be an old woman, because I used to love those old women in the pool with the funky, those shower cap, the swimming caps. I'd say, if I want to grow up and be that, I think I'm going to try being a trans now, try transitioning now. And I started transitioning at age 48. So yeah, this year will be my anniversary. It'll be my 10th year. Let's see, one more thing. I don't know if I timed myself or not. Let me just see one more thing I want to say. No, it'll come. Oh yes, actually. So as I was younger, at some point, I was really called to Judaism. I took Hebrew. I went to Seder's. I had friends. I got really involved with that. And at some point I was like, I literally said, fuck the patriarchy. And I walked away from Christianity and Judaism because I was like, I can't do it. And I walked in and opened and met pagans and Wiccans and looked at all of that. And I remember taking a Tai Chi class at City College where I was introduced to Lao Tzu, and who was not a god. So it was really easy to take on, you know, the practices and the teachings. And later on, introduced to Buddhism. And that also resides inside me. I just practice, and it's what I teach. And then, you know, at some point my mind goes, hello, you know, you're in a room full of Jews. So what do you want to do? And this is the time. And I walked into Kahila, which is a radically progressive, community, compassion, and love focused synagogue. And I've been there now since this was going on my 4th year. And so that's where I'm at. Somebody probably should have timed me. I have no idea how long I talked.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Jhos, Hilary, and Lev. There's something, it's not a question that actually was on the list of questions that we discussed, but I'm conscious of, as you talk about your experiences in your lives, each of you has been drawn to a spiritual practice, a tradition that you weren't born in some way, and into, and many, I meet trans people who have struggled with their religious identity or their faith tradition because of transphobia and you know, the lack of a space often. So what was it about these traditions, these faith traditions, these spiritual practices that drew you in? Because it's counterintuitive in a way. It seems a little counterintuitive. It might seem that way to some people. Anybody?
Well, you know, from my perspective, I wasn't able to participate. I think ultimately, just as I turned out to be a woman, I also turned out to be a very spiritual person. But all of that was hidden, you know, when I was trying to be a man. I had to tamp down everything. I said, men can't show emotion. If they do, it's got to be anger. So any kind of connection was tamped down. And, you know, just like Jhos has that, you know, the first hormone kicked in, it was like, oh, estrogen for me was like, unlock this world of emotion that I had no clue about at all. And it was having access emotionally that brought me into a spirituality and ultimately Catholicism. And Catholicism in part because I married into it, let's face it. But also, you know, I've been a creative and a designer all my life. And so there's a depth of ritual and symbol in Catholicism that really speaks to me. And so as a creative artist.
This isn't just for you, Hilary, but for everybody. Is there something within also, are there other things within the actual, for example, the Paschal Mystery for you, Hilary, that connect with your trans experience? For others, I'd have to ask a different question, but it's the same question essentially. Are there things within the understanding of that tradition that your trans experience?
Yeah, because we have a shared homily, you know, it's a struggle for me to not bring up how it's always, you know, whatever the reading is about my trans identity, because very often we're talking about the idea of the false self, and there's probably nothing more visible than me in terms of my false self, you know, and I think that, so yeah, there's a lot of that, and you find it over and over again, but it's just a matter of looking for it. And you know, we're kind of that first generation that's starting to look at it. You know, there haven't been openly trans theologians looking at the theology of Old or New Testament.
And I think that's kind of what I'm asking of, you know, all of you, is sort of, you come with fresh eyes and you bring a different dimension to those of us who are cisgender. You bring fresh eyes to our tradition that is an opportunity to enrich our understanding rather than something as often seen as a threat. I don't know whether the rest of you, I mean, would you like, anybody else like to address that? Yeah. Lev, I think.
Gonna go?
Yeah.
I didn't know if Jhos wanted to go first. I have a particular moment sitting at the East Bay Meditation Center, and this is still early in my journey in Buddhism, and listening to Spring Washam speak about reincarnation. And in that moment, understanding that I had transitioned when I was supposed to, that we are reincarnating if we're fortunate. We're living many different experiences in this life, and so that was one thing that shifted for me. And then, as a spiritual person, I am not committed to the boundaries of any religion or spirituality in my expression, or I believe that we're spirit and more than that. So if you come when I'm teaching at the East Bay Meditation Center on a Friday night, you might be greeted with Shabbat Shalom. And then as I'm giving the Buddhist talk, we might bring in Jesus and Krishna. And then, of course, when I can, and I'm really still not as good as I should be, bringing in other female icons. So generally, I'll bring in Maya Angelou or Alice Walker, or like I said, not enough female leaders. But yeah, so I kind of feel like for me, spirituality is, where is love and compassion showing up?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jhos?
Well, it's interesting. I still, to this day, could not tell you what it was that, excited my 9-year-old mind when Judaism got mentioned. I don't know. It's a mystery, and I just have to say thank you, because it's a path that really works for me. And part of the reason it's a path that works for me is because it's such a mess. And I grew up with messy people in a messy situation in a messy time. And I love that there's this religion that that understands that, the gem is in the mess. And you just have to, there's multiple Hasidic stories about finding the gem in the, in the pile of poop, right? Like it's a classic trope in Hasidic tales. And I don't know how I knew that, but I did. In an intellectual retrospective, I am pretty sure that I looked at what women were supposed to be, like what I was supposed to grow up in the 60s, when you saw what the paradigmatic, white woman was supposed to look like. And I was like, I can't do that. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do that. And I remember being about 5 years old with my mom in a bus, and this, what we used to call a bull dagger, came on the bus. This butch woman, I can still see her face. I mean, I saw her for a total of maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes in my whole life, and her image is seared into my brain. She had a butch hairdo with the wax, well, I can't show you, but, she had this flip, like that Brill cream thing, and short, like this, and a light blue button-down shirt with that kind of cropped, the collars that were popular in the 60s. They were little cropped collars. Sleeves kind of rolled up halfway. She was like this, and she came and sat down, and I was I knew, I knew she represented both my biggest nightmare and total hope. And the nightmare because I could see how every single person looked at her on that bus. And hope because it was like, well, she doesn't have a pointy bra on. She doesn't have a bouffant hairdo. So there's something other. And I remember that. And then guys also were unappealing. They were boxy and they looked like her. Right? They looked like the bull dyke who got on the bus. And I didn't want to look like that exactly. I didn't. But you know what? Those Jewish guys, there was something about those Jewish guys. That little softness. You know, by the time the 70s came and Yentl came out, oh my God, Yentl, thank you, Barbara, right? Oh my God. And if not for Yentl, but for Avigdor, because that Mandy Patinkin was the prettiest man I'd ever seen. It was like, if you could just be like a pretty man, could you, like, maybe that's a possibility. So I don't really know if my little nascent radar, my kid radar, was seeing Jewish men and thinking there's hope there. I don't know. But I certainly do find that feminine attributes in men are prized within Judaism. To be sensitive, to cry, to be, to have emotion. As my journey into Judaism got deeper and deeper, I was like, oh, and women can be strong and sassy, and they run the store, they do stuff. So culturally, I think there was a piece there. Theologically, I'm not really sure, but culturally, there was something more cozy there than elsewhere.
Do you want to come back with anything on that, or I have another?
Oh my goodness, I'm loving hearing each of their stories.
Yes, yeah.
And I want to, just take a pause because I haven't talked about the Black experience. And I remember transitioning. I mean, everything I talk about is the Black experience. First of all, I'll clarify that. And when I remember transitioning and taking testosterone, I actually take testosterone daily. I take it in a cream. And the reason I do that is because initially, two reasons. One, hate needles. Two, I wanted, and part of my hate of needles was racism. And I've always hated needles for that reason. It's a longer story, but this idea that, Blacks were drug addicts really kept me from using the needles. And that's a longer, false, ugly story. In addition to that, it was beautiful for me to every day make that choice. So that 6 months in, when I decided I was losing my hair, I could stop and take a pause. And I did. And then I went back to putting it on. And so I've been taking it ever since. But when I started transitioning, there was another white guy who transitioned around a little bit before me, and he was being seen as masculine. He said to me, "Don't you just love this privilege?" And I said, "If you mean the privilege to get pulled over quicker as a male, then no." And so, and I also want to just acknowledge that we don't have a trans woman of color on this panel, and that her experience is obviously different from all of ours, coming from oftentimes a situation where, as a feminine Black man, having to live in that experience and the harm that comes with that, or seen as a Black man, because I don't want to identify people. And then, as with all males, deceiving the patriarchy and then transitioning to female, the psychological and emotional impact, in addition to the physical and also mental, harm coming from the outside, is devastating and has been devastating. And I just wanted to name that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. One of the things, Hilary, you said, you wrote this somewhere. It's as hard to be Catholic in the transgender community as it is to be trans in a Catholic community. Does that, would you say something about that? And does it resonate for Jhos and Lev, or are your experiences different?
You know, so I've found, you know, that in a queer space, there have been, generally, so many people have been so harmed by their Catholic experience from birth, you know, born Catholic, that there's extremely, you know, painful outlook towards anyone Catholic. So I step right into it. You know, I've been known to you know, wear a stole because although I am, you know, I'm a faith leader. I think without a badge, like Jhos. So I'll do that. And it's interesting the reactions I get because people, a lot of time they have some trauma to work out, and I'm there for them, you know, and I ask the question, you know, what would it be like if the Catholic religion actually supported you in your identity? And sometimes just the idea of that is just like their heads are twisting around, and they don't know what to do with that. And other times I'll have people come up who feel, you know, really really supported by the idea that there's a trans woman and she's claiming her Catholic faith, and that inspires them, you know, to look a little harder, to see what actually works for them in it. I think Jhos was talking about how, you know, messy it is in Judaism, and you know, the myth about Catholicism is that it's tightly structured and all from the top down, because we have a pope, and it's not democratic, you know. And so even if you see something you can change, like other churches, Episcopal churches and so on, they say, oh, well, you know, we have our you know, democratic processes and so on, and so, you know, we must be, you know, better at involving people, and that's not necessarily the case. I think the thing that really happens is that it all happens at a parish level. You know, the kind of Catholicism you get happens in the community you're in, and it can be such a vastly different experience. You know, in Colombia and in Canada, and in the United States, and Africa, around the world, it's a vastly different experience. And so, and I learn a lot from people from around the world, Catholics from around the world, who explain how, oh, well, it's okay with my bishop, or, you know, it's like, we've worked this out, you know, we're supported. And I go, well, what's wrong with my bishops here? Now, I can't say that, you know, it might be my current bishop is pretty okay. He's doing well, shall we say. But the American bishops as a whole can be a bit of a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I wanted to pop in on that.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree, Hilary. Like, you are, you know, if you get to the point where you have broken away from whatever painful experience you've had, if you've been in a community that is not honoring or at least curious enough to make room and ask questions and say, this might be really awkward, but we love you. We want to keep you around, right? And you've had to move on. My experience is that there's a place for pretty much anybody. You know, queer folks. There are organizations, religious organizations that have formed up that are queer welcoming or queer normative. Certainly in my universe, you know, which my chavruta, my study partner is Dev, is Lev's rabbi over at Kehila. I'm part of a queer yeshiva movement that was started by a lesbian rabbi and that is teaching those very books that are sitting behind me that look so yentily, you know, to people like all of us. Y'all would be welcome to come and learn some Talmud with us, because we are, you know, looking at those texts and saying, actually, they're kind of queer texts, and that the basis of Judaism is a queer basis. And I think you could probably say the basis of Catholicism is also a queer basis. I mean, the folks who started Judaism, as we know it, rabbinic Judaism, had broken away from a massive power structure that privileged only the very, very few and elite and caste-oriented system, and said, no, you know, you got it all wrong. You read the Torah and you read it, you know, backwards. Like, you know, you read it wrong. Like, they actually had the chutzpah, the gall to say, oh, it says to do that, but you didn't read it closely enough. It looks like it says, take your belligerent and rebellious son out and stone him to death. But you didn't notice the part that said, oh, a son and not daughters. So we're not going to do it to daughters. And you didn't notice the part that said, and his both parents, his mother and his father, has to take him out. So any kid who doesn't have a mother and a father, or both, is exempt. Oh, and they had to grab him by the shoulder. So any kid who's got a parent who's got a, you know, a physical disability is exempt, and on and on and on until they got to, no, you read it wrong. That was a shorthand way of saying, never do this. Whatever you do, don't take your son out and batter him to death because he's belligerent, because there'll be no males left if you did that, for one thing, right? You know what I mean? Like a tradition that that teaches like that. That's so queer-headed. Right? And to think that it could be completely railroaded by a frightened, traumatized, you know, patriarchal system is tragic. I mean, I actually think that queer people inside spiritual traditions that are coming back and liberating the spiritual part, like you're doing a mitzvah. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You are called to do it. And I feel like being trans is like extra dose of spirituality for me. Right? It's like, wow, I got to live 44 years as a female. I got to conceive and birth a child. I got to do all of these outrageous things that gives me a worldview that's incredible. And now I walk through the world looking like this and getting to know what it's like to be like, hey, oh, hey, yeah. Hey, like I can say like so much with just hey now. It's unbelievable. Hey is its own language. Hey, hey, hey. So I think we're here to teach.
Thank you, Jhos. And Hilary, Jhos and I spent some time in Jerusalem studying. I was a group of Jewish leaders and Christian leaders, and I was the token Catholic in the group. And we had a lot of fun together. That was a wonderful experience. I presume if somebody, a student or somebody, needs to find a resource to find some way of connecting with a faith or spiritual tradition, are you all okay with them reaching out to you and you send them point them in the right direction?
Absolutely.
You have a website and an organization. Thank you. Lev, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I can quickly say that absolutely, in Buddhism, for example, of course it's messy because you can't have humans in spirituality and not have mess. So anybody that tells you there's not a mess is really not present, and being honest. And for us, the trans community, I definitely see I can claim leadership in bringing one of the first trans events to several of the Buddhist communities in the area, including the Spirit Rock Meditation Center. And it's only been like 5 or 6 years that we've been having conversations and trainings in that area. I think, and maybe I'll save, oh yeah, and the other thing I want to say, because I can see, Donnell, that time is running,
Yeah.
is
we're going to the other section in a few minutes. Yeah.
Earlier this year, we have our end of the year things. And so for me, it's solstice and then the beginning of the year. And one of the commitments, one of the things I ask myself is, are you going to step towards Judaism or not? Because you need to figure out what to let go of, because I have so many things happening. And I said yes. And in addition to being called in to play Queen Esther in Jhos's event, I found myself in a Black trans Talmud meeting that is led by a Black transgender rabbi. And so, yeah, I just wanted to name that, like with everything, when we follow spirit, if we can get grounded enough to do that, we will be led in the right direction.
Thank you. I think it's probably time to move into our breakout rooms. CY, you're ready to set us up. If somebody doesn't want to join one and you just need an interlude, that's okay. I think you could tell CY. I hope he can take you out of the groups, but they're going to be groups of 3 people. We're going to have 5 minutes for those who want. And the focus will be what stood out for you in the panel sharing today, and what do you want more from it? What will, where would you like us to go for the rest of the 45 minutes that we have together? So we're going to break out, CY?
Yes, I prepared to break out, put you all in the breakout room.
And if somebody doesn't want to be there, even if they get sent to a group, they could just switch off and everybody will respect.
Yeah, you can let me know, text, send a chat to me.
We might need people might, yeah. So this is not an interlude, but it's a
right. So now I will stop recording. So from now on, the conversation will not be.
Thanks, CY. Thank you.